Well, today we come to the end of the Beatitudes. We're on the 8th one today, and we've gone out of order because I'd been going through Luke's Gospel, and we got to the Beatitudes, and Luke gives 4 of them. Well, Matthew gives 8, so then we did Luke's ones in order, and then switched over to the ones that were an addition in Matthew's Gospel. So today's beatitude is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. This one is very, very important. We need more peacemakers. Watch the news. We see a lot of strife going on in our world. We see war going on between Ukraine and Russia. Seems that there's more and more mass shootings for no good reason most of the time. We see there's great political divide between the left and the right, and a lot of anger out there. 2 political parties that have a really hard time working together for the common good. See acts of violence happening all the time. Racism and racial violence. We badly need peacemakers in the world. And this series of Jesus' teaching is so important. It's one of those verses, like many verses in the Bible. Maybe you've read them many times. You go through them. Some of them don't make a whole lot of sense on the surface and really need to sink in and be thought about. They're just short sayings. But as the word beatitude means from the Sermon on the Mount, supreme blessing, supreme or ultimate happiness, something that we all want. It's very, very important that we don't just learn them, but that we apply them. Jesus teaches us to embrace the Hebrew concept of shalom, which means wholeness and harmony in our lives, in our hearts, as well as with those all around us, in all aspects of life. Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, we'll read this part of the Sermon on the Mount. Now when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. And today our focus is verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. The first thing here is that peacemaking starts with you. You might not be able to single-handedly bring about world peace, but committing yourself to be a peacemaker, if you'll say that with me, I am a peacemaker. I'm a peacemaker. That's one thing I have to remind myself again and again. I'm a peacemaker. Sometimes, it seems like often when somebody's trying to pick a fight with me in some manner or another, it's one of those things I have to remind myself and just say to myself, I'm a peacemaker. Or sometimes say to myself, I'm a man of peace. It seems rather counterintuitive. It doesn't always come natural. Couple couple of things with me. Just personally, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather when I was growing up. He'd pick me up after school pretty often, and I went on vacations with them, with my grandma and grandpa. But my grandfather was a World War II vet who fought in the South Pacific, and unlike a lot of people, he seemed to like to talk about it pretty often. Brother and I would look up to him with some of his Rambo type of stories, but he was always telling us it was a kill or be killed world out there, and you had to be ready to fight at all times. And his son, my uncle, had owned a karate school for a while, and I grew up with all of that from about the time I was 6 years old to 18, always being conditioned and ready to be attacked and to fight back. And there's a lot of good aspects to martial arts, but maybe I had to unlearn as an adult, always looking over my shoulder or always being ready to throw down when somebody provokes me. But it's one of those things, and a lot of the answer to that is just to remind myself is there are a lot of people out there that are provokers, that just want to start something with anybody else around them. And one of the things I've learned, it often has nothing to do with you. We have to admit that really we have no idea what's gone on in somebody else's life, who might have abused them and kicked them around to make them so angry. And more people need some kindness more than they need to be taught a lesson. It's one of those things, and it's hard to do. To say, I'm a man of peace, or I'm a peacemaker. It starts with you. We all want to live in a world of peace. One of the funny things with this verse, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. There was a group then that were called sons of God, that called themselves sons of God. They were zealots. We know the word for zealot, somebody who's extremely passionate about something and takes the cause to the extreme. Well, we get the concept of zealot from Jewish people that wanted to violently overthrow the Romans during the time of Christ in the first century. The Romans ruled over them, and they were the revolutionaries that were secretly gathering groups of people to fight back against the Romans. In fact, one of Jesus' disciples the gospel calls him Simon the Zealot. Interesting group of people that Jesus called to him. We have Simon the Zealot that wanted to take up arms and fight back against the Romans. And then we have Matthew the tax collector that was working for the Romans, collecting revenue for them to fund them. It's confusing because we have Simon the Zealot and Simon Peter both there. But the Zealots called themselves sons of God. Kind of like a lot of militias today call themselves sons of liberty. So sons of God were zealots, but Jesus was reminding us that sons of God are not the people that are looking for a fight. No, sons of God are peacekeepers. That's kind of an irony. What are UN infantry forces called? United Nations peacekeepers. As sometimes it may take some force to be able to keep the peace. But bit of an irony there. People expected the coming Messiah, who Jesus was, to be a zealot or to be a political leader that led the people to fight back. Yet we call him the Prince of Peace. I sometimes wonder what the world would be like if Jesus had been a military leader that came and overthrew the Romans. I think we would live in a much bloodier world had Jesus set that example. And that was one of the things where it seemed Jesus disappointed some people in his day, being a spiritual leader rather than a military leader. There's a quote that goes along with this, with Jesus calling us to be peacemakers. Gandhi, being a famous man of peace and nonviolence, has a quote that comes to mind. He says, "You must be the change you want to see in the world." We'll say it's worth saying again. You must be the change that you want to see in the world. Biblically speaking, we're called to bring peace. We're called to be an advocate for the problems that we see around us, to do something about it, to advocate for the oppressed, for the widows, the orphans. Romans chapter 12 says it well. If it is possible, and I believe this part's key, if it is possible, because we all know it's not always possible. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. 3 parts here. If it is always possible, but it's saying it might not always be possible, but as far as it depends on you, to do your part, to live at peace with everybody around you. So as far as it depends on you, and it doesn't always depend on you, some people cannot be placated because anger and hate have consumed them, but as far as it is possible, as much as you can do, live at peace with everyone around you. Now, there are opportunities to be peacemakers on a small scale. You might have coworkers. Anybody here ever have coworkers that can't get along? Debbie is raising her hand back there. Now, let me see. The people who work here are Debbie, myself, and Sharon. So we got to talk later, Debbie. I thought we all got along here, but yeah, we have coworkers that don't get along. Anybody here have neighbors who don't get along? Well, I'll bet most of us here have some family members who can't get along very well. And that's a good place to start. Being a peacemaker in your family, helping people to be able to reconcile. You can bring peace in your family. We can bring peace between coworkers, between races, between friends. We've all had groups of friends where a couple of them are not seeing eye to eye, between neighbors in our community. I think peacemaking and conflict resolution is a very, very valuable skill in churches. I wonder how many church splits could have been avoided had there been a good peacemaker there that was skilled in conflict resolution to be able to get people working together. Things in churches get a little heated sometimes because sometimes comes down to, I have a strong feeling in the direction that we go and what God wants here, and you have a different vision for that, of where we should use our time, our human resources, our money. Sometimes people get some very different ideas and butt heads when we're supposed to all be working together. It can be very challenging at times. Philippians 4:13 comes to mind. I can do all this through Christ who gives me strength. In the midst of turmoil, in the midst of endurance, in the midst of enduring things. Second, to be a peacemaker, you have to be at peace with yourself. It's a call to deal with the anger in your own life, the unforgiveness that you might be harboring. Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. First of all, we have to deal with our own sin and have peace with God. Billy Graham talked about that a whole lot, of finding salvation is finding peace with God, having Him forgive your sins and be in a relationship with Him. Without Him, nobody can be at peace with God because we're estranged from our Creator through the sin that we're born with, which we call original sin. Without a relationship with God, we have an empty place in our lives and are not at peace. How do you find peace? Well, it starts with being reconciled to God, with coming to Jesus, with being saved. But then there are still Christians sometimes that have turmoil, but it's letting God work in your life to resolve the anger that you have. Perhaps anger from trauma of your upbringing. Perhaps things that people have done to you that you've been holding on to. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you." That's saying in order to have peace in our lives, we have to focus our mind on God. We have to be having communion with Him daily, spending time with God in prayer. There it says peace comes from having a mind that's focused on God and a mind that trusts in God. Doing what the Beatitudes says, being pure in heart, being hungry and thirsty for God. That's where we find peace. We have peace from knowing and serving the Prince of Peace. There's a story of a peacemaker in the Bible that would be great to read today. 1 Samuel chapter 25. Story of a really good story of a peacemaker in the Bible that we can think of as a model. Now Samuel died, the prophet Samuel, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Paran. Now David at this point had been anointed king, but Saul was still reigning in Israel, and he'd been in hiding with a group of other soldiers. He'd been in hiding for a while after he had been a general under Saul, because Saul was ordered him to be executed. Now a certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. So we have this beautiful, level-headed woman that was married to Nabal, who was a mean and surly man who was a Calebite. Any of you have a few Calebites in your life? A few Nabals out there? You've probably had one of these Calebite co-workers. Maybe you have a few Calebites you're related to. Most of us do. You probably have a Calebite or two living down the street from you that just can't seem to get along with anybody. And I wonder, why did an intelligent and beautiful woman marry a mean and surly man? Maybe it was an arranged marriage? I don't know. I've read several headlines and articles that explain why women are attracted to jerks and why men are attracted to mean, witchy women. It's out there. You've seen it. I know you have. Well, it says that usually very disagreeable people are confident and they know what they want. And it seems that there's something attractive about that. Somebody who's confident, somebody who's a bit cocky, somebody who knows exactly what they want. Well, they tend to give other people direction. They seem to project the illusion of knowing what they're doing. And so people are attracted to that. But you need to be wary of that and aware of that out there so that you don't become like Abigail and marry one of those and be yoked with somebody like that. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men to them, saying, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it's sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants, your son David, whatever you can find for them.'" So basically he's saying, hey, I have this attachment of military with me, and do you have any food you can spare for us? Because we're hungry. We've lived for a while, right, with your men, and we've become friends with them, and we've not taken anything from them. So can you spare for us something to eat? When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message. Then they waited. Nabal answers David's servant, "Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered from my shearers and give it to the men coming from who knows where?" So he doesn't just say, "No, I don't have any to spare," because it's obvious that he does, having these thousands of sheep and everything, but he insults them, and he insults David, saying, "Who's this guy David? I don't know who he is. Why should I share any of what I have with somebody else?" So David's men turned around and went back. And when they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Each of you strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went out to David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. So we have 600 men here. 600 men here, and they've been insulted, and now they're going to go deal with it. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give your master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields with them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us, the whole time we were herding our sheep near them," saying, hey, these guys protected us. These guys have been protecting us. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He's such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. This paints quite a picture, that the Bible says he was mean and surly, and that he's such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. And there are people like that out there. Nobody can reason with them. Nothing is going to change their mind because it's made up. Nobody can break through the hard shell and the tough exterior that they're projecting. Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. She told her servants, "Go on ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, "It's been useless, all of my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave one male of all who belong to him." So they were all about to die. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal." She's talking about her husband here. He is just like his name. His name means full, and folly goes with him. Boy, I have to take a step back sometimes where Hebrew names all meant something. The Hebrew names all meant something. What's wrong with the mother and father who named this guy Full and Folly Goes With Him? Think of names in the Bible like Ichabod out there. Funny sounding name, but it means the glory of the Lord has left Israel. He lived up to his name. "And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my Lord sent. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as surely as I live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal, and let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you." So the story goes on, but she saved a lot of lives that day by an act of kindness and by getting in between two stubborn men that were looking for a fight. It's exactly like what we're talking about today. Being a peacemaker. We all want peace in our lives. At least as Christians, I think we all do. I hope we all do. And there's people out there who don't. There's Calebites. I'm sure you know several of them that are just like Nabal, wicked men or women who just want to go around stirring the pot. Just want to go around making other people mad. They figure, well, I'm miserable. I don't have any peace in my life. I'm angry. So I'm going to go out and make everybody else angry and miserable. Misery loves company. But most people want peace. What's the cliche beauty pageant answer of what would you like to change in the world? What would you like to see in the world? World peace. We all want to live in a peaceful world. Remember, it starts with you. Cultivate peace in your own life. Try to make peace with those around you. Be a diplomat. They say diplomacy is the art of letting someone else have your own way. You might say, but I'm just one person. There are ways you can bring peace. And remember, when you meet a Nabal, when you come across a Nabal or a Calebite, remember when somebody insults you, what's the next beatitude? Blessed are you when people insult you and say evil against you. Remember, when somebody insults you, it says more about that person than it says about you. You know, there are people out there like Nabal that just lack tact, lack class, lack human decency, but that's their problem. It's between them and God. You don't need to participate in every fight or every argument or every insult somebody wants to bring and lays before you. I like the saying as well, you've heard it. Not my circus, not my monkey. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Hey, if they want to have a fight, I don't need to participate in it. Because we're reminded as well, you never know what happened to that person. You never know what they're going through. Sometimes you'll never know why. Sometimes it becomes obvious. Well, we know a lot of the time it just trickles down. A lot of the time the bully you remember from school had their father beating them at home. And maybe without even realizing it, they're doing it to other people, or a mother that's cruel to them and picking on them, and then they come to school and pick on and tease the other people. And maybe they realize that as an adult and apologize to the people they've hurt, or maybe they never heal and just go through that their whole lives. Well, creating peace brings a blessing. Blessed are the peacemakers. It's happy are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. You ever know somebody that embodies peace in their life? They're usually pretty happy. You ever know somebody that's kind of skilled in getting between other people and saying, hey, this isn't something we need to fight about? They're usually pretty happy people, blessed by God. Well, we're called to be a peacemaker. Peacemaking's an attitude. It's all about having a peaceful attitude, which is the opposite of an aggressive demeanor or an angry demeanor. Wishing somebody peace a lot of the time can diffuse anger. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. One tool that goes with it, you ever have somebody come out and start yelling at you? They're coming out swinging? Well, I think it's just human instinct to want to yell back and answer them with the same tone of voice. I'm going to give it right back to them. But if you can answer in a gentle and calm tone, that does a lot to diffuse the anger and diffuse the situation. Writer of Proverbs knew that. When somebody's yelling at you next time, give them a gentle, quiet answer, a soft word, in order to turn away wrath. Sometimes that makes the person even madder, though. If somebody wants to yell at you, just keep your composure, talk back calm. A lot of the time it's hard for them to keep yelling, as it's really easy to yell back and forth. Last part of the verse, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Being a child of God means you act like Him. People say when you act like your parent, you are your father's son. Well, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. If they're saying it about God, God doesn't have any bad about him. So if they say you are your father's son about God, if you're going to be a son of God, means you're going to act like God. We're called to follow Christ, who came to bring peace, who came to be the Prince of Peace, to set people free from the captivity of sin and to reconcile people to God who are not at peace with God. I can say each of us here must know somebody that's not at peace with God, and we might be able to help them find that peace. Peace between people and God. Tell the good news. Share the gospel. But also it's between believers sometimes too, that we can embrace this attitude of peace. Be a peacemaker. Remember, as we study the Beatitudes, be attitudes, be these attitudes. That's not literally what the word means, but it's just a play on words. Be these attitudes that Jesus taught us to have. 8 attitudes. It's through them that you find a sense of beatitude or supreme blessedness and happiness. Amen.